Dennis Wrigley Ministries, a better way, unity, renewal and healing.
Churches are places where God takes hold of people and sends them out to do things in His name. Churches are, by definition, places where initiatives are taken. If you look at the history of the churches in Europe in the last 100 years, you will find scores and scores and scores of charities to help orphans and poor people and folk in distress were established from within the churches. God called His people out into the world. And it's been our experience in the Maranatha community that this is exactly how He works. For example, many years ago, there was a Russian poet, a lady called Irina Ratishinskaya. And her story is so significant for today. She was not a believer, but she was very interested as a schoolgirl to know why the Communist Party wanted to take her regularly into the anti-God museum. And this triggered off an interest in finding out about God, and she became a Christian. And she wrote Christian poetry. And she was thrown into prison, into a concentration camp. And she'd done nothing wrong, but she was subject to the most appalling torture by her communist guards. A number of us heard about this, and we decided that we would pray for her. And we got a great big photograph and we took it round Maranatha gatherings all over the country. And other people walked with us, and we prayed and prayed and prayed that Irina should be set free. She was kept prisoner in a cold, damp prison, and she was assaulted. She was fed cancer-producing drugs. They did terrible things to her. But the more they punished her, the stronger her faith became. But we felt we had to not only pray, but to persuade hundreds and thousands of people to write to the Russian embassy. And we managed to get hold of the address of her concentration camp. So we wrote to her commandant. Thousands of letters, week by week, month by month, year by year. She was sentenced to many years. Imagine our joy when finally the will of her captors was broken and she was set free. I met her in London. We prayed together. And she said she was aware in her times of greatest distress that out there were thousands of her brothers and sisters praying for her. And she said, your prayers were answered. I just feel that Irina Ratishinskaya has been an inspiration for many of us, in our community especially. You see, initiatives are taken, but when they're taken in God's name and in the power of His Spirit, we see amazing things. I remember a Maranatha meeting some time ago when one or two people felt the prompting of God to do big things in their lives. One lady, Joan, was so sad to hear of the street children in Lima, Peru, who were desperate for food. And then and there, she prayed with a group and said, I'm going to Lima. 6 weeks later, she'd sold a house and she was on her way. And she spent years there feeding 400 children with breakfast every morning, living in a little hovel. But God used her mightily. Another man, Eric, in Maranatha, felt God's prompting to drive overland to the Sudan to help children who were mentally ill and who were being neglected. And so he got an ambulance and he took with him medical equipment. He took also a doctor and a nurse, and everyone said, "You're mad, driving all the way to Sudan." He went right across Europe, right through the Middle East, and he got there. And in Sudan, he built a wonderful center for mentally ill children. Amazing things happened there. Lives were transformed. But as with Joan, so with Eric, people said, "You're mad." And I believe that that initiative, that vision, that thought was planted not just in their minds as individuals, but in their minds as part of the great family of God. And the same applies on many other scores. Rona, dear Rona in our own community, who was led to go to Africa to sink wells for villages which were desperate for water. And then I think of other people in our community like Rob and Catherine, labouring there among AIDS orphans and children in desperate need in Uganda. And there again, we see amazing things happening. They've been joined by another Maranatha lady, Sarah, a physiotherapist. And she is constantly reporting miracle after miracle in her work in Uganda. I believe that we've got to understand that God, as it were, taps us on the shoulder and says, "Are you ready? Will you go?" And he waits for our yes. Exactly the same thing happened in Northern Ireland when we were faced with hundreds and hundreds of people burnt out of their homes, shot, injured, afraid, running, homeless. And God said, "You must do something." And so a group of Maranatha people set up an organization to receive them, to rehouse them, to help them with their social payments, social security payments, to help them have food, to get a school and a doctor. But the initiative came in prayer. You started by praying for those in need, and God said, "Now do something." And when we think of the persecuted church over the years, over and over and over again, we prayed for Christians in need. We prayed for Christians long years ago in the Moluccan Islands, part of Indonesia, where literally hundreds and hundreds of Christians were being martyred. And we made direct contact with them, day by day on the telephone. We prayed. We met their leaders. The Catholic and Protestant church leaders came over. We held a meeting in London for the politicians and church leaders to meet them. And what happened was a great blossoming. And even now, years later, the harvest of those efforts is for everyone to see. And not long ago, there was a tremendous outrage in India when literally thousands of Christians in Orissa were burnt out of their homes by the mobs. And again, one or two people in our community were led to make direct contact with the church leaders in Orissa, which we did. And we were able to give information about this to the Foreign Office. We were able to get information to the European Parliament. We were able to see amazing pressure being brought to bear by the European Parliament on the Indian government. And aid came for those thousands of stricken Christians. And more recently, in Jos in northern Nigeria, where 500 Christians were martyred for their faith by a Muslim mob. We're able to make direct contact with the Archbishop there and with his colleagues. And we're able not only to pray, but also to bring help. I mention these not as acts of charity. I mention them to show the way in which God prompts his people to pray and prompts his people to take action. They prayed day by day. We heard the bombs going off when we were praying for them on the telephone. We prayed for them in Indonesia. We prayed for them in India. We prayed for them in Nigeria. We prayed for them when there was a terrible outrage in Sudan. And every time, God honored those prayers. I believe to pray in these situations is very dangerous, because if you mean what you're saying in your prayer, God may well take hold of you, and you may end up in a place you never expected to be. Lives are changed, transformed. The mechanics are very simple. The people of God wait upon God. The people of God listen to God. The people of God hear God speaking. The people of God are then empowered by God's Spirit to do something. I believe the church is the place where God enables people to take initiatives. I believe increasingly Christians should pray and simply ask God, where do you want me to be? What do you want me to do? What do you want me to say? To which our response will be, well, I'm weak. To which his response is, I am mighty. To God, all things are possible. Let's reach the stage in our churches where we recognize that God is a God of surprises. God is a God who shakes foundations. God is a God who breaks down our apathy. God is a God who catapults us into situations we never expected to be in. There is the excitement of the Christian life. There is the dynamic of the Church of Christ. And this, I believe, is going to be evident more and more in coming days as the storm clouds grow darker, as the persecution of Christians increases. Let God surprise you. God bless you.
Dennis Wrigley Ministries, a better way, unity, renewal and healing. Thank you for watching.